In 1972, the death penalty was overturned and 10 people in North Carolina were taken off of death row. Lawmakers scrambled to make new capital punishment laws, and North Carolina chose to make death mandatory for people convicted of certain crimes, becoming effective in 1974. But just 2 years later, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that mandatory death sentences were also unconstitutional. Instead, they had to break down the death penalty trials into 2 phases, one to determine guilt and one to set the sentence. North Carolina wrote new laws that met these conditions, and those went into effect on June 1st, 1977. Velma Barfield's trial began on November 27th, 1978. I'm Laura. I'm here with my best friend Marina, and this is Grim.
Way to not cover a very controversial topic like the death penalty.
And you may or may not have said while we were waiting for the theme music that you love, and I quote, death penalty shit.
I do, and I did say that.
Well, good thing, because this entire episode is about that.
Okay.
So get excited. Before we get into the episode, though, it's our favorite time.
Boop, boop.
Patreon time. Woo! We have a whole bunch. I'll tell you, last time we had a whole bunch and we were like, should we split these across episodes? And Marina, with amazing foresight, was like, what if we get a bunch between this episode and next? And she was right, because we have a whole bunch.
Because you guys are awesome and we love you so much.
Awesome. We love you. All right. We're going to start our shout outs with Ashley F.
Ashley F, we love you.
We love you. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
Danny,
we love you.
We love you, Danny. Thank you. Lizzie M.
Lizzie M, thank you so much. We love you.
Thank you, Lizzie. We love you. Raquel M.
Raquel M. Raquel, we love you.
We love you.
Thank you so much.
Manu,
we love you.
Manou. I hope that I pronounced that correctly. I think I did. Thank you very much.
Is that Alaskan?
I don't know. That's a very good question, but I don't know.
Woohoo, Manu, we love you.
We love you. Shelby O.
We love you. Thank you so much, Shelby.
Brooke D.
Brooke D. We love you.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you so much.
Amanda H.
Amanda, we love you so much. Thank you.
Eric K. And it's Eric with a K. So it's Eric. All the K's. Yes.
Eric.
Thank you, Eric.
We love you. Thank you so much.
Aria E.
Aria E. We love you. Thank you so much.
We love you. Joe.
We love
Thank you, Joe.
Woo, woo. Thank you so much.
Danae W.
Danae W. We love you, Danae. Thank you so much.
And Lindsay H.
Lindsay H. We love you so much.
We love you.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys. And let me just say, we may have just learned for the first time in 6 months how to get to our Patreon messages.
The app it's very confusing on how to get the messages, so I'm sorry. We're sorry.
But we did have one from the last episode, and I didn't see the message that I should have changed the shout out. So I'm sorry. So I just want to give a quick shout out to Destiny J, aka DJ Dynasty.
I wish I had one of those air horns to do it. That would be a dangerous thing for me to have access to, though. So
thank you, Destiny J, aka DJ Dynasty.
I made Marina do that one because she just does it so well.
And I almost just smelled burnt toast. I almost got stuck in a...
almost had to reboot her.
Smack me upside the head.
I'll just do that for fun.
Oh, man.
Anyway, that was a lot. Thank you so much.
Keep them coming, guys. We love you.
Woo! Awesome. Thank you.
You guys are the best.
All right. So as a reminder, I had my primary source for this case was the book Death Sentence, The True Story of Velma Barfield's Life, Crimes, and Execution by Jerry Bledsoe. Once again, spoiler alert. But I think I told you I didn't leave you guys on really a cliffhanger.
No.
We kind of knew what was up last time.
You kicked us off the cliff before you ended the
My
last
little
episode.
fledglings fly. Yes. So last time we were talking about how Velma had just been brought in for questioning on the suspicious death of Stuart Taylor, and she is now being charged for premeditating his murder. Is that the right way to phrase that?
For premeditated? For his murder?
Yeah.
In a premeditated fashion.
Yeah, I wrote that and I was like, that sounds really strange.
And Stuart, she poisoned him with arsenic.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that was the theme of last episode.
Yes, it was. I'm just trying to remember him specifically.
He was the last, not husband, but the one who they were dating for a while. He was Dolly's nephew. And he was the one who was taking care of her when she allegedly had the break-in her trailer.
Okay, yes, and then they moved in together. Gotcha.
Yeah, he was, and he was the one that was pretty decent. Like when she had the overdoses, even though he didn't want to marry her anymore, he still took care of her.
Okay.
And she was still like, no, I'm going to take your money and also poison you.
Thank you.
So,
I think that was a good reminder for gremlins who also have colander brain.
yes, it's catchy. So, as they said in the intro, Velma's trial officially began on November 27th, 1978. The jury was chosen quickly, made up of 7 men and 5 women. Each of them had agreed that he or she could vote for the death penalty. In early interviews with Chief Lovett and Investigator Parnell, Velma had admitted to poisoning her mother, that's Lily, Dolly, and John Henry, as well as Stewart, but she was only being tried for Stewart's murder.
Oh, so she just came right out and
She
admitted
did.
guilt?
Yep, and I couldn't find, at least in the book, it didn't have a lot of details on exactly how that interview went, but I think they basically were like, did you poison them? She was like, yeah, but I didn't mean to kill them, was essentially her whole statement.
I mean, that's a strategy.
It sure is. And so she was only tried for Stewart's murder because Stewart was the only one she'd poisoned after the new death penalty law was in place. John Henry had died 3 days after it had gone into effect, but the state had no evidence that Velma had poisoned him after that June 1st date.
Oh, okay.
Also, if DA Britt, so remember that's the district attorney in this case, if he had failed to convict Velma on Stewart's death, he could then try her on the others versus if he did it all together and lost, But either way, it wasn't looking good for Velma because on top of all of that, her lawyer, Attorney Jacobson, had only been licensed to practice in North Carolina for 4 years and had never handled a capital case.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So he was one of the reason you may be wondering, why did she choose him? She didn't. He was court appointed because she did not have the funds to have a lawyer of her own. And he was one of the few court appointed lawyers in the area who met the criteria for trying capital cases.
Wow. Okay, so we have public defenders take death penalty cases in Connecticut too, but
Oh, really?
They're definitely very experienced public defenders.
Yeah, I don't know why he was able to be on, they had it like on rotation and he just happened to be on call when Velma's case came up, but I don't know why.
Somebody has to be your first death penalty case, right? I mean,
yeah, I guess. Yeah, always remember your first. Is that too dark? It's too dark. Sorry. I had to say it.
Oh, man.
In contrast, DA Britt was known as the world's deadliest prosecutor.
I don't know that I would want that title.
No.
You've got to be a true believer.
Yeah.
That's what we used to call them. Like, you have to be a true believer in that system.
I will tell you why he took this journey, because he actually originally didn't believe in the death penalty.
Okay.
Interestingly enough. But
paint me a word picture.
I shall. That's why it's so many pages here. It's because I have so many pictures to paint for you. But grim fact, at the time, of all of the people occupying death rows across the country, nearly 4% had been put there by him.
Oh, shit.
Like, that's insane.
Across the country? Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many prosecutors there are in the country, but I think it's a lot.
Yeah.
A lot. So
yeah.
I didn't do that math, but it's a lot.
Wow.
So not only was he not originally a believer in the death penalty, he also didn't want to be a lawyer originally. His father,
join the club, buddy.
Yeah, I know, you just find yourself there. Wake up one day. What have I done? His father had been a successful prosecutor, but Britt had no interest in following in his footsteps. He was afraid of public speaking. But he was smart, finishing high school early and going to a local college. And after completing his 2-year military obligation, because he had been an ROTC student, he ended up getting a scholarship to Stetson University in Florida and studying law. I don't know, probably because of the scholarship. I'm not sure what made him choose that. But he was able to please his father and face his fears. So he took the bar after that in both Florida and North Carolina and passed both. No big deal. He worked in Florida for a while until his father got sick, and then he went home to North Carolina, where he opened a law firm and did okay, well enough to catch the attention of the DA, John Reagan. Reagan offered Britt a job as a prosecutor, and he took it and liked it a lot more than defense. Defense. Words are sounding very...
Defense.
Why do you have 3 claps? It's only 2. right?
No.
Yeah.
Defense. No, you could do it either way.
It's not.
What are you saying?
claps.
Defense.
I don't know. Now I don't know, but it's not 3 the way you did it. It's not.
Defense.
No, it's not. That's not right. Okay.
Defense. Defense.
Okay, well, that sounds really dumb.
I'm pretty sure it's clap, clap, clap.
Gremlins, let us know.
Is there like a rule for like how many times you can clap after you chant defense?
Yeah, that's why everyone does it together. I just don't think it's 3.
I guess I just haven't.
Defense. Defense. Yeah,
See, that
it's only
doesn't
2.
sound right either.
It does.
Anyways,
It does.
I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and I don't know if you know this, but Connecticut's not
get
that
to
close
cheer?
to Denver. And yeah, so I don't get to go to many games.
I thought you were going to say you just don't get to cheer them on much.
That's messed up, but that's also true.
Facts. Speaking of being dumb, I had an aside in here. Do you remember way back in probably episode 1 where I learned what a prosecutor actually means, that I didn't realize that it was specifically for criminal cases
Yes.
like the state? Well, I also didn't realize that, like, it never really processed. It's only like prosecutors are with the state for criminal cases. Like, I just kind of figured, since you had law firms of lawyers, that there were just law firms of prosecutors.
No.
Anyway, it didn't occur to me. So I thought I would share that learning journey.
I'm so glad that you have learned.
Yes, I'm also still alive, despite my child's illnesses in daycare trying to take me out. Anyway, so Britt did well and became Reagan's successor, officially stepping into the role of DA in 1974. He, as I said, had been against the death penalty, but he came across a lot of criminals who had committed horrible crimes and felt that the only way to deal with them was to eliminate them. But when he got into it, he realized that cases hardly ever actually made it to trial, let alone sentencing of the death penalty. Capital cases were a lot more work than other cases, and the state just didn't have enough resources. On top of that, those who went to jail for life sentences rarely spent that long in jail. It was not working to deter future murderers. So he wanted to change that and went on a blitz, he called it. His goal was to prove that putting more people on death row would actually decrease the number of murders in the county. And in less than a year and a half, he had conducted 13 first-degree murder trials and won 13 convictions, a national record for a single prosecutor.
Wow.
Yep. So Pembroke University conducted the study evaluating if Britt's blitz theory, say that 10 times fast, was right, and it was. The murder rate in that county plummeted dramatically in the 2 years that Britt was in office. So that's a very long, grim fact, but it was interesting.
I just always question causation versus correlation when it comes to crime statistics. And the classic example is that murder rates are related to ice cream sales. When ice cream sales go up, so does murder. And it's not because people who eat ice cream murder. It's just because more ice cream in the summer, the heat, people commit more murders in the summer. So I just wonder, like, what else was going on in society at that time. Hey, there's my criminal justice degree doing some work there.
And my econometrics that I learned on all of the things that relate to affecting, correlation and causation. What I would hope that the people doing the study in Pembroke University considered is all of those other factors. And that's what econometrics does, is counts for that.
Yeah. So. I didn't even know that was a word. So I guess we're just learning a lot tonight.
Yeah. We're
econometrics. Wow.
Yeah. I loved it.
Okay.
It's like math and econ together.
Interesting.
My dream.
Wow, you're a nerd. Anyways.
So nerdy. Okay, anyway. So, back to Velma. Velma was sent to the Dorothea Dix Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation. And that was, funny enough, the place that she had sent Thomas, her ex-husband.
Yeah, I recognize the name.
Yeah. After a month, Velma was released from the hospital and sent to the county jail. She was arraigned on May 5th and charged with first-degree murder. Attorney Jacobson entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, and the trial was underway. Opening statements would normally open, but DA Britt didn't believe in giving the defense a map to, now I'm like doubting which way it is, a map to his strategy. So he declined, and Attorney Jacobson followed suit. So no opening statements.
Oh, is that a thing? So we don't have them in Connecticut, but that's an interesting thing to do.
Yeah. In some ways I get it, because the whole point, I think, of opening statements is to like help the jury be prepared for what they're about to see.
Right.
But,
It helps weave the story because evidence comes in very piecemeal, so it weaves the story of that they're going to get from these individual witnesses.
Yeah.
But I guess, it could be a roadmap too. That's interesting.
I mean,
Wow.
I guess he's done something right because he's had a lot of success.
Who am I to question him?
Yeah, right. Exactly. So on the first day of testimony, DA Britt aimed to show how horrible Stuart's death had been. He first called Billy Taylor, Stuart Taylor's son, who helped to bring him to the emergency room. Billy told the jury in detail what pain his father had been in. On cross-examination, Attorney Jacobson only succeeded in having Billy confirm that Velma, too, brought Stuart to the hospital. That's it.
Okay.
Good. Next, DA Britt brought in Leland Jones, the doctor who treated him at the ER, and he, too, spoke to Stuart's extreme pain and agony. When Attorney Jacobson questioned him, he focused on having the doctor talk about the different types of pills that Velma was taking and their effects, and that was really his tactic with every doctor that DA Britt called. Next up was John McPherson, the paramedic who treated Stuart in the ambulance, and he also spoke about Stuart's pain and how he screamed in pain. And to really prove his point, DA Britt had the paramedic replicate the scream that Stuart made, in court.
Gosh.
Yeah. Yep. And then all Attorney Jacobson could do was get the paramedic to confirm that Velma had appeared concerned about Stuart.
Okay.
Really, really compelling testimony. Mm-hmm. And this is how it went for several witnesses. DA Britt would bring someone in to talk about how much pain Stuart had been in, and Attorney Jacobson would have them just acknowledge that Velma maybe cared about Stuart.
The only thing that matters to me is I guess Velma's reaction, because implicit in murder is typically pain, right? I mean,
yeah, true.
To me, it's like overkill, and it's almost, to me, it's trying to like pull on the heartstrings of the jurors to just have 4 or 5 witnesses come in and be like, he was in so much pain.
That's true, and I mean, especially having the paramedic like replicate the scream is, I would say, overkill for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. But again, I've never tried a capital.
But I think part of what he was trying to show is not just that she obviously had committed murder, because she admitted to poisoning them and just said I didn't mean to kill them.
Right.
So he was trying to show that while they were in all this agony and pain, she was just standing by. And we'll talk in a second about it, but she could have told the doctors, yeah, I poisoned them, when it was clear they were dying, and they might have been able to save people's lives, in particular Stuart's. But
gotcha.
So,
okay.
But agreed. I mean, it wasn't that many people, but still.
Yeah. Just sounds like a lot.
That's well. We got a lot of pages to go. So next, DA Britt called Alice Storms, Stuart's daughter. She had known that Stuart had been sick from phone calls with Velma and had immediately joined them at the hospital. DA Britt asked her about her father's handwriting and then had her identify 3 checks totaling $495, all payable to Velma, of course, all cashed, including the one that had been cashed the day before Stuart's death. Attorney Jacobson actually successfully blocked him from having Alice confirm or invalidate the signatures, but the point was still made. Even though it wasn't official, they saw the checks and the implication was there. At the end of the first day, DA Britt called Bob Andrews, who had done Stuart's autopsy. He testified that Stuart had died from acute arsenic poisoning, and Attorney Jacobson asked Dr. Andrews if that assessment eliminated any other possible cause of death, maybe hoping for him to say no. But he confirmed, yes, that is the only cause of death. And obviously that didn't help him. And I thought an implicit rule as a lawyer was to only ask questions you knew the answer to.
That is correct.
Either he knew that answer and that seems like it wasn't a good question to ask, or he didn't know the answer. I don't know.
Probably a bad choice either way.
I think so. I think there were a few of those. The next day, DA Britt sought to show that Velma had killed more than just Stuart, and therefore Stuart's death was intentional. She, again, claimed that she just wanted to make him sick. Before he could do that, and I feel like we've talked about this before, he had to convince the judge that he could introduce all of this evidence in the first place by showing precedence.
Preponderance of the evidence.
Is that what it was? Oh, I didn't even get to use that word.
Yes.
Damn it.
We were just talking about this, the prior bad acts, which have to be proven by a preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt.
This is why Marina's legal corner is a lot better than Laura's legal corner, even though my alliteration is better. And I just wrote, I feel like we've talked about this before.
We have.
He cited a case from 1938 where a man was tried for giving a pesticide to his daughter to collect, you guessed it, insurance. In that case, the state had been allowed to show that the man had previously murdered 2 wives for the same reason.
Right.
And
His MO.
Yep, exactly. That established his intent. And that case had been upheld, so that was enough to satisfy the judge. With this success, DA Britt set out to prove that Velma had intentionally killed her mother, Dolly, and Jennings. The latter came as news to Velma. She never confessed to poisoning Jennings. So all the other people she did, but she never admitted to poisoning Jennings.
She's like, I killed all those other people, but not him.
Literally.
You can't pin him on me.
I don't know why. My theory is maybe that was because that was Jennings Barfield. She kept his last name. So, well, she also never got married to the other people. But I wonder if maybe she had a special place in her heart for him.
Or maybe somebody knew what her MO was and just poisoned him to take him out and then blame her.
No, she admitted it later.
Oh, okay. Spoiler alert.
Nice try. Yeah, there's no spoilers in this episode. She did it.
She done did it.
She done did it. All right, so DA Britt called 12 more witnesses to address those deaths. First, he focused on John Henry, beginning with Margie Lee Pittman, John Henry's daughter. Like Stewart's children, she testified as to the pain and agony he experienced while he died. And then DA Britt had her look at the check from the supermarket and confirm that it wasn't her mother's. Remember, record signature.
Oh, yep. Records.
Then on cross, Attorney Jacobson tried to have the testimony stricken, or not on cross, sorry. He just tried to have the testimony stricken and was denied. So no good. Next up was Frida Monroe, another one of John Henry's daughters, who talked about an interaction she had had with Velma, where Velma told her, I don't think your daddy will go home alive. This was at the hospital.
Oof.
When Frida asked why, Velma said, I've seen it happen too many times.
Okay, ma'am.
And again, Attorney Jacobson tried to have the testimony stricken and was denied.
Objection, Your Honor. Grounds, it's devastating to my case. Yes. Overruled.
Literally what happened. He basically was like, she can't say that. Next, DA Britt put Joe Alexander on the stand. He was one of the doctors who treated John Henry. He confirmed that he was familiar with arsenic poisoning and that he saw it in John Henry, though he didn't realize it at the time. On cross, Attorney Jacobson leaned into the fact that he was also Velma's doctor, interestingly enough. So he asked him about the prescriptions he had given Velma and had him talk about their effects. Because Attorney Jacobson was basically just trying to prove that Velma was on drugs and didn't know what she was doing, so she couldn't possibly have done it intentionally. Right. Next, DA Britt called witnesses who would speak to Lily's death. First was Velma's niece, who recalled seeing Lily throwing up while Velma was putting plastic sheets on her bed, so just knew that she was sick. Weldon Jordan, Lily's doctor, talked about her symptoms, how he wasn't sure how she died, and how he recommended an autopsy, which of course they performed with Velma's permission. The next witness DA Britt brought up was Edward Fonvielle Jr., the manager at the bank where Velma took out a loan for just over $1,000 in Lily's name. The loan wasn't repaid, and crucially, a notice was sent 4 days before Lily's death. Because we know that Velma, when she thinks she's going to get caught for stealing money, that's when she does the poisoning. Ultimately, the loan was repaid by money from Lily's life insurance.
Oh my gosh.
The first witness of the next day was Jennings' daughter, who spoke about the hours leading up to his death, followed by Neil Warden, Jennings' doctor, to basically say the same as the other doctors, what his symptoms were and how he was confused by his death.
Did anybody imitate the screaming that he made?
Not these ones. No, see, he toned it down.
Okay.
You know, he made his point early, caught the attention, and then kept riding that wave.
I just am picturing somebody, they're like, so he was on the bed and he was like,
literally, like the book goes into detail. It was basically as awkward and crazy as you're imagining.
It's insane.
Like, it was like a blood-curdling scream. And like props to the paramedic for really leaning into it. Can you imagine? Like
he's like, wait, it wasn't high pitched enough. That's insane.
Yeah. Having never been in a courtroom and certainly not during a trial, I can't fully imagine, but it seems like it would be out of place.
I can't say that I've ever seen that, but I'm gonna ask around now. Any mock screaming during your testimony?
Yeah, crazy. Now, when the case was first being put together, DA Britt had submitted a request to have the bodies of Jennings, Lily, John Henry, and Dolly exhumed.
Oh, yeah.
2 medical examiners confirmed that all 4 had died from arsenic poisoning. Wow. So we have confirmation there. like I said, not a cliffhanger. We knew this was this was her. Finally, Chief Lovett and Investigator Parnell spoke to their interviews with Velma, where she had confessed to all but Jennings' murder. And again, she said she had poisoned them, but hadn't meant to kill them. But for more dramatics, during their testimony, D.A. Britt also brought out an empty bottle of the Singletary's rat poison, which they had retrieved from a field behind Dolly Edwards' house after Velma told them that she'd thrown it there.
Bringing it back to your opener.
Exactly.
On part 1.
Yep. Good memory. Good.
I try.
D.A. Britt concluded by bringing back the medical examiner who had done the autopsies of John Henry and Dolly and asking her about arsenic poisoning. He had her confirm that the bottle of Singletary's he had previously shown contained enough arsenic to kill a human being, that one can recover from it, but that it accumulates in their system. So all of those cases where she had gotten someone sick, like Dolly got sick over the summer and then got better. And then I think...
And her daughter too, right?
Yep.
Her daughter and her son-in-law.
So if they had kept doing it, they could have died from it. And then it was, might have been Stuart or John Henry, where like he got sick and then was better, and then got sick, and then was better, and then finally died.
Don't let Velma cook dinner for you.
Or make you tea, apparently. But that's actually the first time I've thought, I wonder if she didn't know it accumulated. That's the only... she's definitely guilty of all of this, but the only case where I could possibly believe that she might not have known it would kill someone, she would know in general, but like maybe she didn't know it accumulated. I don't know.
The first time.
Yeah, right. Like, exactly.
I'm like, maybe the first time would be an accident, but I don't know. 4 or 5?
Yep. Exactly.
Sketchy.
Good thing we could include that evidence with the preponderance of the evidence.
Yep. The prior bad acts.
The prior bad acts, yes. Okay. And then he also had the doctor talk about how there was indeed an antidote that could be administered and would be life-saving if done so early enough.
Oh, wow.
Yep. In other words, if Velma had been telling the truth that she'd only meant to hurt Stuart, not kill him, she could have told the ER doctors what she'd done, and they could have given him the antidote to save his life.
Wow. And the intent to kill someone can be developed that quickly.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, so like she could have truly not meant to kill him when she gave him the poison,
but
but
then
by
when
not...
she decided to not tell them.
Oh, that explains why he
intends
emphasized
for him
that.
to die. Yeah.
Oh, well, see, okay, this is actually more fun because I feel like I'm learning more about my own case on why, because they emphasized that and I didn't realize why. I thought it was just to emphasize how bad she was.
Premeditation doesn't mean that you have to think about it for a year. It's just as soon as you intend for that person to die.
But like how far? Like because isn't when somebody like I find out you're cheating on me and I just all of a sudden pull out a gun and shoot you, like don't I have that moment to like think I'm gonna pull the trigger on this gun? Like where does that intention? What is that definition?
Well, that would be intentional if you pull out a gun and shoot someone.
But premeditated? Oh, we're talking about intentional.
We're talking about you have the intent.
Oh, intent versus premeditation.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Are those different things?
I don't know. Now I'm questioning whether they're different things.
And now we've entered the normal part of Marina's legal corner where Laura asks a lot of weird questions.
Yeah, Laura's like, okay, let's go back to 1L crim law. So somebody, not only that, that's your example is like a heat of the moment. There's like a defense. It's like a defense, like a heat of the moment thing, and like a passion.
Oh,
yeah. So anyway,
and with that, the state rested.
Yeah. Now I'm like, what the fuck is the difference between intent and premeditation?
I don't know. There must be a time. I don't know. We'll find out.
I'm just wondering, murder is intentional. Like if you're charging someone with murder, you have to have the intent to murder.
Is that versus manslaughter?
Yeah, like degrees of manslaughter, you don't necessarily have to have the intent.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's some element of premeditation when you have an intent because you're thinking about it.
Yeah. Okay. That's
anyways.
Fair. All right. Did you know you're actually taking me through law school through the course of this podcast?
I told you 10 out of 10 don't recommend.
It's really because it's fun for me. I really like it.
Because you're not doing it.
Exactly. Okay. So, and as I said, with that, the state rested. Okay. And so does Marina's brain.
Yes. Thank you.
Just kidding, because we're going to the defense now. Okay. Very nice. See, that sounds so much better.
I did it 3 times.
Did you?
Yes.
I only heard 2.
Okay. Well, it was 3. Anyways.
All right. So now Attorney Jacobson, much like myself, was in over his head. He aimed to show that Velma hadn't meant to kill anyone, just make them sick. And so he was going for, basically, we all know that she's guilty, so he's just going for second-degree murder.
Right.
As a backup, he also wanted to show that all the drugs she was taking made her unable to comprehend that she was committing a crime when she gave Stewart poison. First up, he called Dr. Arthur Douglas, the psychiatrist who did an independent study, or independent psych evaluation of Velma. Dr. Douglas spoke to her mental state, that she was struggling with depression in the least, but also that she had a passive dependent personality disorder and, of course, also a history of drug abuse.
Right.
But when D.A. Britt took over for Cross, he easily had Dr. Douglas acknowledge that Velma had no mental issues and was sane at the time of the crime. Mm-hmm. Not very helpful for Attorney Jacobson. Next was Dr. R.E. Hooks, who had been Velma's doctor for almost 15 years, or I should say one of Velma's doctors. In addition to him talking about the prescription for Valium he'd written for Velma, Attorney Jacobson asked him to talk about what would happen if someone took Valium with something else to show that Velma was often significantly impaired. And then Velma took the stand.
No, girlfriend.
Attorney Jacobson hoped it would be his way to show she hadn't meant to kill anyone and that either way she'd been under the influence of drugs. But it was a terrible idea.
D.A. Britt is going to destroy her on the stand.
You won't even be surprised.
To shreds.
Because on top of, besides the fact that he's capable of doing that with anyone, I think, Velma didn't understand how trials worked. She was angry at being arrested in the first place. And she didn't like Attorney Jacobson. She just didn't think that he was doing enough for her. So not only would she be set up poorly for D.A. Britt, but Attorney Jacobson, she didn't even like him. Mm-hmm. So that's not a good place to start. So anyway, once she was on the stand, he started by asking about how she'd met Stewart, her forging checks in his name, and then purchasing the rat poison and putting it in his tea. She recalled Stewart becoming sick and bringing him to the hospital, and then he got her to talk about her own drug use, emphasizing her going to different doctors and always being medicated, as he called it. And then he asked about the other people who had died in her care. And this is Attorney Jacobson, so her side.
Right.
She acknowledged that she had poisoned John Henry by putting rat poison in his cereal and his coffee, giving only the reason that she didn't want anything to come of her forging a check in his name. That was her only reason for poisoning him.
Really aggressive.
Mm-hmm. And then she admitted to poisoning Dolly the same way, but just said there was no reason.
Just 'cause.
Really winning over the jury with this. And finally, she admitted to poisoning her mother after taking out that loan we talked about in her name. And she again underscored that she didn't intend to kill anyone. It was very much a bad tactic, at least in my legal opinion. By saying that she hadn't meant to kill anyone, they're leaving the jury with no question that she had poisoned Dolly, John Henry, and her mother. So Attorney Jacobson was banking on them believing that she hadn't intended to, in order to bring that charge down to second degree. So instead of having to prove that she had been responsible and intentional for murder, D.A. Britt only had to show that she knew what she was doing.
Right.
So I feel like he made it easier for them. I mean, granted, she confessed, so he
had
his hands tied.
With the prior bad acts, like it doesn't even seem that hard to do. If you're like, I didn't mean to kill them. Okay, again.
But you know it. You did it.
First one.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you're like, well, I just tried to do it a little bit different every time. And gosh darn it, they just kept dropping like flies. Like, what are you going to say?
All right, Jennifer Coolidge. Coolidge? Oh, which is it? I don't know. Anyway, that's who you sound like. You know who I'm talking about. Gosh, I didn't mean to.
Is that the one from Legally Blonde who's like, I want a hot dog real bad? Okay.
Yeah. You did. You sounded like her. I want a hot dog real bad. I can't do it. Okay. Anyway. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that Attorney Jacobson was just, if he could have chosen to not take the case, he should have not taken. I mean, he didn't have a choice. So anyway. Finally, he had her talk about the initial interview with Chief Lovett and Investigator Parnell, trying to show that she had been under the influence of drugs and therefore her confession wasn't admissible. Spoiler, it didn't work. And then he turned her over to D.A. Britt.
And the end.
Yeah. D.A. Britt's main goal was just to get her to show anger, to show that she was capable of this kind of murder. Now, he had familiarized himself with her psychiatric evaluation and determined that the best way to do this was just flat out confront her. And it's a bit difficult to get across how his questioning got under her skin without reading the transcript. Don't worry, I'm not going to do that. But it basically was like question, answer, and like faster and faster.
Right.
And like just every time she gave an answer, he had another question and would like doubt her and just like completely needled her, and she just lost her shit. He fanned the flame by poking at her poisoning Jennings, because at this point she hadn't admitted to it and had some pride about it. And she just got so mad that it was clear that I'm going off script and I lost my train of thought here. She got super mad. So we're like, I'm really into telling you about the testimony.
Too long didn't read. She got super mad.
I got ahead of myself. Where did I go? Oh, then she, so this went on, and as I said, she got so mad. But DA Britt got her to change her answers on things. Like, she had originally said she didn't remember poisoning Jennings, and then she changed it to I didn't poison Jennings, which is such a small thing, but it's really like she's clearly just answering in a defensive response without really thinking. She's just disagreeing. He also got her to admit that she had written the forged check the day that she poisoned Stewart and cashed it just before he died. She acknowledged that she didn't tell the doctors anything when she brought her victims to the hospital, which I now know is very important, even though it was clear they were dying, and she knew that doctors could possibly save their lives. Now, DA Britt also got under something that had bothered me. It appears that I'm becoming a lawyer. It appears. It appears that her rationale for poisoning people was so that she wouldn't face the consequences of that forgery. But by that logic, what good would just poisoning them do if you weren't going to kill them?
Exactly.
So clearly you needed them to die. So DA Britt asked her about that, and she just said, well, if they were hospitalized for a while, she could get enough money to pay them back.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Now, throughout the cross-examination, she seemed almost, I said that like we weren't in the middle of cross-examination. This is still DA Britt's cross-examination. Yep. She seemed almost proud of her answers. Like she forgot that she was on trial for murder and was just so intent on like answering and getting out from under DA Britt's thumb.
It's like a game.
Yeah, exactly. So because of the way he was asking questions, he got her to answer almost in defiance, but really she was just saying exactly what he wanted her to. Complete train wreck. He had successfully erased her credibility and the belief that she had done it by accident. She showed no signs of remorse, and it was easy to imagine that she had committed the murders, especially Stewart's, with intention and premeditation.
I'm sure.
Whether or not those are separate things. TBD. Velma's testimony ended the fourth day of the trial. The next day, Attorney Jacobson started by calling a series of doctors, from Dr. Bob Rollins, former superintendent at the Dorothea Dix Hospital where Velma had stayed, to doctors who prescribed Velma pills or treated her during overdoses. Attorney Jacobson's goal was to prove to the jury that Velma had a long history of drug abuse, so it followed that she might have been under the influence at the time of the poisonings. On cross, DA Britt asked the doctors about Velma's sanity. They wouldn't state that she was insane, and while that's not the same as confirming that she was sane at the time of the murders, it did take the legs out from under the not guilty by reason of insanity thing. Next, Attorney Jacobson called Ron, that's again Velma's son, and used him to emphasize Velma's abuse of the prescription pills. So he's just really hammering home prescription pills, drugs, under the influence.
Right.
But when DA Britt began his questions, he took it a different direction. He asked Ron about his father's death. Remember, that was the fire at the house, and Ron had seen the axe marks on the door.
Oh, right.
So although Velma hadn't poisoned Thomas, she had likely set the fire, and DA Britt wanted the jury to know that.
We didn't start the fire.
But Velma did. Most likely.
Wow. So he's like, oh, okay, well, let me just throw in one extra murder.
Precisely.
My gosh.
Exactly. Because it's like not only, so it's not even by accident arsenic, and there was something unique about this. Like, she's just flat out
a murderer.
Yep. The next set of witnesses that Attorney Jacobson called were all doctors who'd prescribed Velma Valium or similar pills. Again, DA Britt took advantage on cross and had one doctor who'd treated Velma on the day she'd first poisoned Stewart confirm that Velma had not appeared to be incapacitated that day.
Are you incapacitated?
I am.
Lots
of words.
I just keep thinking with Valium, I'm sure if you take enough of it, but I just keep thinking basically Legally Blonde. It's like endorphins make you happy, and happy people just don't kill other people. They just don't.
I was thinking that when you said the ice cream.
Valium makes you happy, and happy people just don't murder other people.
No, not the case here.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, I mean, it just, every time that Attorney Jacobson brings someone on, DA Britt's like, oh, excellent. That's going to prove my point. Let me bring that right out.
Yeah.
So each time Attorney Jacobson brought something out, it really only marginally helped him, because we kind of have already hit the point that she's been on these prescription pills. But DA Britt just now has the opportunity to prove additional points. And now, I'd love to, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, in case you didn't know.
Okay.
But so I can't really judge decisions made by people who are actually lawyers. I just feel like this wasn't a good one.
You're not going to your armchair quarterbacking.
Is that what it is? Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's the phrase.
It's Monday morning quarterbacking that I was thinking of. That's why I hesitated.
Pretty sure armchair quarterbacking is a thing too.
It is. Yeah, that's in the moment.
Or backseat driving.
That's with intent.
Yes.
Just kidding. Anyway, Attorney Jacobson ended up putting Velma back on the stand because he'd forgotten to ask her to tell the jury what particular drugs she'd taken the day she poisoned Stewart.
Don't do that.
I just don't think that was important enough to open her up to more cross-examination from DA Britt. And I'm right, because he used the time to dig at Velma's account of poisoning Stewart, succeeding in showing that she was changing her answers from either a previous testimony or her confession. And on top of that, he just got her to show her anger again, and it just like further dug away at her credibility.
But I'm surprised how much he'd be able to go into that, because if he was calling her again, he would only really... DA Britt should only be able to ask about whatever was on direct.
I don't know. I might have summarized poorly because I was like writing like a dissertation about the trial of Velma, so I was trying to summarize
really matter.
things.
I'm just wondering. It just seems like it would be limited,
probably
to what because if he started asking her the same questions that he asked her on cross the first time, it would be objected to as asked and answered.
Oh, but I don't think he asked this the first time. I don't think he asked about this stuff. Like, because he was asking now about...
Or beyond the scope of the direct.
That's what I wonder if it would have been. But...
Obviously not.
Yeah.
Anyways.
But
how many times have we said anyways this episode?
A lot.
Bonus points if you're keeping score at home.
Somebody will go back and listen, and I will feel really bad because we're not going to give you any rewards for it. Maybe we'll give you a shout out.
Maybe we will.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll do something.
And with that, Attorney Jacobson had no further evidence for the defense. Thank you. See, that doesn't sound right. It just doesn't. Anyway, as they prepared for closing arguments, Attorney Jacobson asked the judge to allow the jury to consider verdicts of guilty of second-degree murder and not guilty of by reason of insanity, as well as, of course, guilty of first-degree murder and not guilty. I didn't realize that you had to be told what things you could give as a verdict. I thought you could just give whatever verdict you thought was correct.
No, and we've had this discussion before because you can choose to include lesser included offenses, but if you do that, you're giving the jury the out. So the jury can only render verdicts based on what charges are brought by the prosecutor.
Yeah. Okay.
And they are instructed accordingly.
Okay. That makes sense.
They can't just be like, I don't think she murdered him, but like, I'll just throw in an assault.
But this is like I guess that makes sense because this is like the degrees of the murder.
Yes.
Okay. Well, either way, the judge, I didn't say anyway. The judge denied the not guilty by reason of insanity since the burden of proof of insanity which was on the defense had not been met. Mm-hmm. So our assessment was also correct.
Right, because basically their own doctors were like, no, she wouldn't have been.
Exactly.
She would have known exactly what she was doing.
Which again, how would you not have prepped that ahead of time?
You do, but it's almost having done like medical legal conferences, you can talk to a doctor and ask them what their opinion is. Mm-hmm. And you are asking your questions in a way to get the information that you want. But the other side can equally get the information that they want True. Depending on how they ask the question. Like a doctor can straight up say like, listen, if you ask the question to me that way, my answer can be yes, but I can't say no if they ask it the other way.
Which is exactly what he did. Yeah.
Right. And that's... If you had a doctor that was lying, you'd be affecting their credibility too. You'd be like, well, how could that be the case if your answer is yes to this and no to that? So it's just a risk that you take when you call a doctor. I
mean, again, I think he was up against a brick wall. There was nothing he could have done.
It was an uphill battle for sure,
to say the least. Yeah. So anyway, oh my gosh,
I know
it's really all I can think about.
It's really bad.
It's interesting.
It's unfathomable how many times we've said anyway.
Almost did it again. In his closing, I think I've substituted anyway for In his closing argument, Attorney Jacobson attempted to summarize the evidence in a way that would encourage the jury to choose second-degree murder, emphasizing that the state had to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Velma had intended to kill Stewart. He reminded them that they weren't determining her guilt of the other murders. Funny he used that word. By the way, that is a verbatim, that they are not determining her guilt of the other murders. It seems like, again, by acknowledging that they were murders, he's acknowledging that she had poisoned them. And if she'd done it previously, she clearly knew what would happen, and therefore it was intentional. Like,
That was a very poor choice of words on his
right?
part.
Like, isn't that, anyway.
That was bad.
Yeah, okay.
Bad.
I feel very validated for recognizing. That was
Yes.
my words, not the book.
You'd want to say deaths.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
No, he said murders. Okay. He ended his short argument, it was only 30 minutes, by asking the jurors to consider her mental state and use of drugs. Again, that was his whole defense. In his closing argument, D.A. Britt underlined the importance of recognizing that Velma had committed the other murders because of the reasoning I just said. He also talked about her ability to deceive, feigning care for those who she was not feigning care.
Feigning?
Feigning care.
I was like, fiending.
She really wanted to care
Feeny.
for them. Okay. Who she was I'm not going to say it again. Who she was responsible for killing. Even if you didn't subscribe to her knowing that she would kill Stewart, all she had to do was tell the doctors at the hospital what she'd done when she'd realized he was dying. So that was the that moment of intent that we were talking about.
Right.
He told the jury that she had agreed to the autopsies because she'd gotten away with it the first time.
Right.
So she was cocky. D.A. Britt, too, only talked for 30 minutes because he started at 4:30 and promised the jury he wouldn't keep him past 5.
Oh, wow.
As if to seal the deal, when D.A. Britt finished, Velma sarcastically and silently clapped, like golf clap, like, oh, good job. Like, don't move. Just sit there.
Right.
Don't do anything. And, of course, the jury witnessed all of that.
Yeah, you look like a tool.
Yep. And it was in their hands now. The court was to reconvene the next day, interestingly, a Saturday. I say that because that is abnormal. Yeah, you're making a face.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. But the jury only needed an hour and 10 minutes to reach their verdict. Unanimously.
Not guilty.
Right. Wait, did you? No. Unanimously, they found Velma guilty of murder in the first degree.
Yeah.
As I said, no spoilers here.
Right.
As I mentioned in the beginning, capital cases have separate trials for guilt and sentencing. With the guilty verdict on the first-degree murder, they now began the sentencing hearing. I won't take you through as much detail in this hearing, don't worry.
Thank you.
I will just mention that Attorney Jacobson brought forth witnesses that spoke to Velma's drug abuse. D.A. Britt had plenty of experience in convincing a jury to dole out a death sentence, but it was especially difficult because Velma's a woman. He focused on Stuart Taylor's life being taken and the agony he felt in his final hours, likening it to torture. He emphasized that they should not feel sorry for her because she had already killed people, including her own mother.
Right.
He reminded them that to warrant a death sentence, they needed to consider aggravating factors. In this case, he wanted them to account for the fact that Velma had financial gain, so that's with the checks, that she had been hindering enforcement of the law by killing Stewart to prevent him from prosecuting her for the checks, and that the murder had been particularly heinous, which he referred to as the agonizing death by arsenic, and Velma just standing by while he suffered. Attorney Jacobson's argument was weak compared to D.A. Britt, both in...
I was going to say, give me the mitigating factors.
Yeah, exactly. Look at you. It's like, you know law.
Oh my gosh.
Both in how unconvincing the facts were as well as his delivery of it. So he attempted to show the mitigating circumstances in order to save Velma's life. He again explained that Velma had killed Stewart while under the influence of drugs and that was the reason she'd killed Stewart and why she'd killed before. But just like during the initial trial, he really only succeeded in further highlighting all the bad that Velma had done. He also tried to say that while a person with a life sentence, which is considered to be 80 years, could be eligible for parole in North Carolina after serving a fifth of that, if D.A. Britt truly thought Velma had committed 5 murders, then he could just put her on trial for 4 more, making the total 400 years, a fifth of which was 80, so a life sentence. So he's basically saying, like, just try her and, like, it'll add up to the amount.
Right.
Like, not a great argument.
No.
And that was it. He ended his argument.
I mean, he didn't have anything else.
No, there was literally he was just like, she was on drugs ?
Yeah.
Again, he did not choose this, and she really. I didn't get into this, but she was also talking to the media like half the time, more so after when we get into appeals and all that. Which again, spoiler alert, but you know, she just kept talking to the media and literally being like, "I'm ready to die. I'm guilty.
Oh.
He's like, can you shut the fuck up?
He's like, could you maybe stop?
She's not helping him at all. Now, remember, to save Velma's life, Attorney Jacobson didn't have to convince every single juror. To receive a death sentence, the decision must be unanimous. Just one person not willing to give Velma the death sentence would cause a hung jury, leaving her safe. Mm-hmm. The deliberation began on December 2nd, 1978. The jury had been given a verdict sheet, and on it were 4 questions that had to be answered. The first, did the aggravating circumstances exist? Second, did the mitigating circumstances exist? Third, did the mitigating circumstances outweigh the aggravating? And fourth, were the aggravating circumstances sufficient for the death penalty? The jury deliberated for 3 hours, which doesn't sound like that long to me.
To consider
for
someone's
a death
death
sentence, yeah. When they filed back in, the judge asked the foreman if they had found that the aggravating circumstances exist. They did. He asked if they found that the mitigating circumstances exist. They did not, nor did the mitigating circumstances outweigh the aggravating. And finally, were the aggravating circumstances sufficient for the death penalty? They were. Immediately after the verdict was read, Attorney Jacobson made a motion for mistrial, citing misconduct of D.A. Britt during closing arguments. His
Naturally.
claim, yeah, I mean, what else are you going to say? His claim was unfounded and the motion was denied. Mm-hmm. The judge set the date of Velma's execution for February 9th, 1979, just over 2 months after the trial ended. Velma was brought to the North Carolina Correctional Institute for Women. It didn't have a death row, and Velma was put by herself in a cell intended for 4 people, so not so bad.
Oh, wow.
She was coming off the drugs she'd been put on in jail, and that had been a whole mess. I won't put all the details here, but they kept trying to take her off things, but she had such a physical and mental dependence on it. They kept having to put her back on other things, and ultimately it took 16 months before she was fully off of drugs.
Wow.
And her conversations during this time were nearly incoherent because she was just having such a tough time. But again, I just mentioned this before, but in her interviews, just with the media and all the people she shouldn't have been talking to, she kept saying she didn't want to appeal her sentence, literally just saying, I'm guilty. But with the new capital punishment laws, the appeal was mandatory. That being said, obviously her statements were hurting her. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, as her mind cleared from the Valium, she grew closer to Jesus and her religion. She was talking with the pastor at the prison, began praying every day, listening to the Jesus radio, and reading the Bible. She even started to preach to the other prisoners. Velma ended up meeting people outside of prison who wrote to her. She talked with the pastor about making amends with the families of her victims, and she did actually write to Alice Storms, who understandably didn't respond. Honestly, Velma was doing well, but we know about that pendulum.
Swish.
Thank you. I need it as a sound thing. 5 months after the end of the trial, Velma's brother was killed in a car accident, which is very sad. The next month, the pastor she'd become really close with had accepted a new role at a different prison really far away.
Oh, no.
Fortunately, he was able to help her find a new pastor, and Velma relied on her religion to help her regain her footing. She returned to her teachings with the other prisoners, and as a result, found that she wanted to live and now hoped that her appeal would overturn her sentence.
It's a little late, Velma. I'm so sorry.
Well, I can't believe what I'm about to read through is all of the appeal process, which I feel like is going to be a lot to read through, and I'm not even reading the details of half of it. I didn't realize how intense the appeal, like how many different avenues for appeals you have, and how complicated it is, and how everything gets pushed back, and like you're just constantly, it's just like all of it's a moving target. I didn't realize how complicated it was.
Especially for death penalty cases. Those, when I worked at the appellate clerk's office at the Supreme Court, I would see the briefs come in. This was actually before the death penalty was repealed in Connecticut. But like the Komisarjevsky briefs and the Hayes briefs came in. Those things were like 2-3 inches thick, and normally a brief, is between 10 and 20 pages. Yeah, it's brief. I don't even remember what the limit is. 15 pages. I don't know. It's been a hot minute since I've done an appeal. But yeah, the death penalty ones are thick.
Yeah, I think there's one, I think I said 2,000 page at some point.
Holy shit.
Which is a lot of reams of paper.
With the appendix?
I don't know.
Okay.
It didn't tell me. It just said 2,000.
Okay.
And I wrote that because it was a big number.
That's a big number. That's a lot of pages.
Mm-hmm. So Attorney Jacobson's first appeal was based on the idea that the insanity plea should have been allowed and that D.A. Britt shouldn't have been allowed to share the evidence of Velma's previous murders. Despite his best efforts, in November 1979, almost a year after her trial ended, the court rejected all of his points in a 21-page opinion, upholding Velma's sentence. Velma was devastated and turned again to her religion to support her. She had more opportunities for appeals, legally speaking, but remember, Attorney Jacobson was court-appointed. Velma hadn't had the funds to hire her own lawyer and still didn't. The state would only cover the trials and the initial appeal.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. So if Velma wanted to continue to appeal, she'd have to pay, but she couldn't.
Right.
So Ron, always her savior, thought to call the local office of the American Civil Liberties Union, and they agreed to provide a lawyer.
Wow.
Her new lawyer was attorney Richard Burr. He was somewhere in between attorney Jacobson and D.A. Britt in terms of experience. He was young, but had started out working on prisoners' rights cases and then stepped in to help with the appeals under the new death penalty laws. Attorney Burr began his work on Velma's case by submitting an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but in June 1980, they declined to hear it. He planned to ask the court to reconsider, but felt that there wasn't much hope, so he hoped to work with the state courts. But since he was helping Velma on behalf of the American Civil Liberties Union, he actually wasn't licensed to practice in North Carolina. Fortunately for Velma, he managed to find a local lawyer willing to help named Jimmy Little. Attorney Little was the former public defender in Fayetteville and now had his own law firm. In September, as expected, the Supreme Court declined to reconsider Velma's case, and her new execution date was set for October 17th. 2 weeks before the scheduled execution, I would be so stressed, by the way. I'm going to say that so many times, like this amount of time before the scheduled execution. I am a deadline person. Mm-hmm. I would be so stressed out.
It's just looming over your head. It's like an axe hanging over your head.
Yes. Mm-hmm. It's just, this whole thing was very enlightening for me. I just didn't realize how many steps and like, you think it's going to be a set date and like that literally you're thinking about the end of your life.
Right.
And then it changes. And then something else happens and maybe it's going to change or maybe it's not going to change. Is it going to stay this time?
It is hard to imagine, but can you imagine killing 5 people? Because also no.
Yeah, no. Good point.
I think you're safe on this one.
Thanks. I feel better now. Anyway, Attorney Little filed... I said it again. I said anyway. Attorney Little filed motions asking for a stay of execution and a hearing to determine if Velma had had a fair trial. He argued that she had had ineffective counsel, citing reasons such as Attorney Jacobson not spending enough time with her before trial, not presenting the right witnesses, and generally failing at properly representing her. Maybe resenting her.
This is called a habeas corpus.
Really?
Yes.
I feel like I've heard that term so much.
Yes. An ineffective assistance of counsel claim is raised at a habeas trial.
I have never known what that meant. I just have heard it a lot.
And it means to keep the body or to have the body. Okay. And you're arguing that you're being illegally held, basically.
Fascinating. Mm-hmm. Oh, I love Marina's Legal Corner. It's just it's little things that I would never know to Google that with this.
And you have to exhaust your other appeals before you can file a habeas. So you can't go straight to an ineffective assistance of counsel claim. You have to do your direct appeals first.
I think he did.
The underlying merits. Oh, no, he did, because you said that the Supreme Court, the state court, 21-page decision.
I was going to say, I got a little lost on like who he was appealing to and what they were saying, so bear with me on this. I tried to get it all right.
Right.
And I thought to myself, I could never be, I always say there are a lot of reasons I couldn't be a lawyer, but one of them being, I would be so offended if someone, I know it's just what they have to do, but if someone had an entire trial talking about all the things that I did wrong.
Oh, I know.
I think I would really have, that would be the first and last time I ever went through it.
And it happens all the time.
Well, of course, because why wouldn't you? Of course you're going to do that, and you're going to argue your darndest to prove it.
And you would bring in an expert criminal defense attorney to say, I would have done it differently.
Yeah, and I would cry. Yeah, okay. Anyway, and I think that actually Attorney Jacobson basically was in that position. He was like, I know this is how it's supposed to go, but also fuck you.
But you have to prove, we've talked about this too before. I don't even know what episode. But you have to prove not only that they were ineffective, but that it would have made a difference.
I do remember that. Yep. I'm sure he did. I'm sure he tried,
because,
I should say.
No, I'm sure. But even if you had an incredible lawyer up against D.A. Britt, I mean, this was a pretty good
I
case.
I bet you that's why I didn't read the details as to why it hadn't they didn't win, but I wonder if that's part of it, is that it wouldn't have made a difference because she was fucking guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good point. Okay.
Thank you.
On October 9th, the judge in Fayetteville granted the stay of execution and the hearing for a new trial, which was to begin on November 17th. So D.A. Britt was still responsible for arguing it had been a fair trial, and Attorney Burr partnered with Attorney Little to, of course, say the opposite. Interestingly, Velma attended, of course she did, but in a completely different capacity than her original trials. She was calm and poised and agreeable. So
she found Jesus.
She did, and got off drugs. Both of those things help.
Two things are helpful, yes.
And as usual, the book describes all of the details of the trial. I will only give the results here, or we would end up with 3 parts, 2 of which would be the trial. The judge produced a 37-page decision, which said that Velma's trial had been fair. He set a new execution date of December 12th, which was just 2 weeks out. Fortunately for Velma, Attorney Little was able to get another stay of execution while he worked on further appeals. And that's what I mean. Like, I would be like, oh my God, 2 weeks, that's it. And then it's like, just kidding, I'm going to work on appeals.
How many years have gone by now?
That's a great question. I think 2 at this point.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that.
Okay.
But it's a while. I think it ends up to like 6 years. In the meantime, Velma was embracing her role as someone to turn to for prayer. And as she was much older than many of the women there, she played a maternal role. In fact, she went by her first name, Margie, and the girls called her Mama Margie.
Oh.
Velma was a model prisoner and really had a positive influence on the other inmates. She would share her own journey of truly finding Jesus and provided guidance with prayer and finding their own religion. As part of her personal discovery, she worked with her pastor on forgiveness, both for her own sins, but also her forgiveness of those who she believed had wronged her. But despite her healing, there was still a dark deadline hanging over her. Attorney Little continued to appeal Velma's sentence, but on July 9th, the state Supreme Court upheld the previous decision, meaning that Velma had to go through another hearing and received a new execution date set for October 21st, 1981. Attorney Little again asked for a stay of execution, which was granted, and appealed the decision. It was denied on December 7th, and just before Christmas, yet another date was set, now March 22nd, 1982.
By the way, this is why they say, or said, that the death penalty is more expensive than just keeping people in prison for life because of the appellate process.
So you have to go through and let the appeals happen.
Right.
In the event that you can uncover that someone was innocent.
Yeah, you don't, or that they shouldn't have been sentenced to death.
Exactly. Yeah. I just like writing this. I was like, again? It's again? Not that I'm like trying to rush it, but you know.
Sure.
Attorney Little next aimed to file an appeal in federal court, meaning he would have to show that Velma's constitutional rights were violated. She received a stay of execution while the judge reviewed more than 2,000 page motions. That's the one I was talking about.
Yeah, that's a big boy.
Yeah. But yet again, the judge ruled against them in a 36-page opinion. I'm not sure why I had to share all the pages. It seemed like a lot of pages to me. So I was sharing, and it's details. Another blow came when her pastor, who had been with her for the past 3 years, relocated. Attorney Little had also taken a new job, but close by, and he told his bosses that he wanted to continue to help Velma in his free time and without pay, which I found fascinating.
Wow.
I think they knew a different Velma, honestly.
That, or you just get so invested in case that you're like, I would rather not get paid than give this up.
Maybe. There was a quote, which obviously I didn't put in here, but it's in my brain. And I forget which lawyer it was, whether it was Attorney Little or Burr. But one of them said I think it was Little, who got the call like, oh, can you help me in North Carolina? I can't practice here. Can you help me out? And he said, I remember how nonchalantly I said yes to something that I would spend so much of my life on.
Yeah.
And I think so maybe it is like that.
Right.
Now, even with that blessing of Attorney Little continuing to help, they were quickly approaching the end of the road. By October 1982, it was beginning to seem that her only chance was for clemency through a pardon from the governor. Her team fought valiantly to drum up support from the public, which would put pressure on the governor. Meanwhile, in May of 1984, the U.S. Supreme Court, those dates don't sound right, so I probably wrote them wrong. The U.S. Supreme Court voted 7-2, refusing to hear Velma's case. With this decision, the stay of execution was also dissolved, and Velma's new execution date, which was to be set for as early as 60 days but no longer than 90 days away, was June 13th. Her lawyers were able to convince the court to move the date to the full 90 days to give them time to work on the clemency appeal. And so the new date was August 31st. At this point, Velma had changed so much, and the details of her premeditated murders were so far away that she was generally perceived as this sweet, Jesus-loving grandma, because she was elderly. Most people were in disbelief that she would be executed.
I mean, don't you wish she had gotten to that point before she took all those lives?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She gets a chance to change. We talk about this all the time.
Right.
This made it even more unexpected when on June 18th, Velma was transferred to Death Watch at Central Prison without any notice. And by the way, Central Prison is where Pazuzu would be held 40 years later. Mm-hmm. Typically, this wouldn't happen until 5 days before the execution date, since the conditions were so much worse. It was a tiny cell, 10 feet long by 6 feet wide, just down the hall from the execution chamber, which just is awful. The lights were always on, so inmates could be constantly monitored, and they were kept by themselves and not allowed to have personal items.
Yeah, to make sure they don't commit suicide, because they're like, we need you to die, but you can't do it by your own hand.
No, on the right date, we want to watch.
Yes.
We want to watch.
Isn't that's fucked up to me.
It is. Yeah, and you can't just have your stuff at the end. I don't know.
No.
I don't know. That's where I get really squirrely on what you should and shouldn't have a right to. I don't know.
Yeah.
That's too much for my brain right now. Velma was given a steel cot with a thin mattress attached to the wall. The cell door had a sliver of a window 4 feet long and just 4 inches high, through which her food and small items were passed. She could only visit with 2 people, and any time she met with her lawyers, she was escorted by guards and strip searched upon her return. Again, so are you going to escape in 4 days? I doubt it.
Right.
I guess maybe you could attack a guard or something. That would be bad. All right. Her lawyers, as I said, used the media to try to fight her relocation. Although the media wasn't able to affect the proceedings officially, Velma had become quite the spectacle, becoming known as Death Row Granny. Because she, again, looked like a sweet old woman that could be someone's grandma. It ended up being another stay of execution on July 2nd that allowed her to move back to the women's prison. Her lawyers put in yet another motion, but the same story played out why do I keep saying October for August?
Don't know.
On August 16th, the Supreme Court dismissed Velma's petition for a rehearing, which also, again, dissolved her stay of execution. The hearing to set a new date was on August, Flora.
What is wrong with you?
What is wrong with me? August 22nd. and again, the execution was to be 60 to 90 days out. Her lawyers were still working on the clemency appeal, but unfortunately for Velma, such a decision was wrapped up in political connotations, and it was an election year.
Oh, boy.
Yep. So they tried to push the date of the execution out to be after the election so that the governor could pardon her without it affecting his race. But the tradition was for the execution to occur on a Friday, and the judge set the date for November 2nd, 72 days out and just 4 days before the election.
Oh, my gosh.
In preparing for the clemency trial, Attorney Little brought on Dorothy Lewis, a psychiatrist from Yale who had extensive experience with violent criminals. She had questioned Velma about her being knocked out as a kid. You remember I said in part one, she'd run into...
Right.
Yeah.
Her big bump on her head.
Yeah,
and I was like, is she Quasimodo?
Close, but no. The frontal lobes control behavior and judgment. We've definitely talked about that before.
The chessboard killer.
Yes.
He got the swing banged into his forehead.
It's the littlest things. If impaired, it could create an inability to curb impulses or anger, thus leading to violence. Overall, Dr. Lewis spent 6 hours interviewing Velma and then produced, again, the 9-page report that diagnosed Velma with bipolar disorder, which had never been recognized or treated. I probably believe that.
Right.
I think so. On September 27th, the governor and his legal counsel met to make his decision. Prior to hearing what he had to say, Velma had signed an affidavit stating that if clemency was denied, she didn't want any more stays of execution. Attorney Little was the one to share the news with her. The governor had denied clemency. The execution remained set for November 2nd. Velma celebrated her 52nd birthday on October 29th. It is actually October this time. At the women's prison with those she'd grown close to.
Also, I think you just offended all of our gremlins when you were like, she's a granny, she's an old lady, and you're like, she's 52 at this point.
I realized that, and I said she's
I thought
elderly,
she was like 80.
and I took that back. But now I'm thinking, when I said that, first of all, she looks way, way older than 52.
Well, she's been in prison for quite some time now, too, right?
That's true. But second, I'm not the one that coined her death row granny. this was the media and all
Okay.
that. And now I also agree with that. 52.
I apologize to our gremlins
me
because
too.
52 is the new 32. So
Also, we're not nearly as far away from 52 as I would like to believe we are. Like, I really think that's really far away.
we're
and
the
it's
podcast
not.
grannies right now.
You know, it wouldn't be the first time I've been called a grandma.
No.
So,
But anyways, I had to point that
I'm
out
glad
because
you did.
you were like, she's elderly. She was coined death row granny. She was like, she was the ripe old age of 52.
Wow, I'm really glad you called that out. Thank
did.
you. Yeah.
I mean, I believe that you're reporting the facts from the book, but I wouldn't call that elderly.
Yeah, it's the media's fault. Death
It
row
is.
granny.
Yes, for sure. Okay.
52 is even young to be a grandmother.
Well,
I mean, it can be. I'm just saying,
can.
like, it's, you know, like you can be a grandma for, well, I guess the rest of your life, but anyway, and there we are.
193.
They had a birthday cake, balloons, and this big long birthday card that everybody signed. Her lawyers continued to work on finding new issues to raise to try to save her life. At the same time, Velma had to choose how she wanted to die. The standard in North Carolina had been the gas chamber, but recently lethal injection was allowed, so she chose lethal injection.
Oof. Imagine picking.
That's what I mean. You're just all of this is surreal to me. Again, not thinking about what landed you there, just knowing it was coming, and then thinking it was a certain date, and then again, I think it was over like 6 years that all this happened.
Crazy.
Just thinking it's going to be this date, and then pushing it out, and then waiting, and not knowing is this going to be the last one. So
crazy.
4 days before her execution date, she was moved back to death watch at Central Prison. On Tuesday, 3 days before her execution date, the judge found no merit to the new issues. Attorney Little submitted a motion with the Supreme Court for another stay of execution and appealing the judge's decision, but it was denied the same day. Several more appeals and denials took place in the short days leading up to her execution. She was with her pastor when the last appeal was turned down. He asked her if she had anything in her life that had not been confessed to the Lord that she needed to make right, and she said no. She had admitted to him previously that she had indeed poisoned Jennings. Though she said, "I didn't kill him, I allowed him to die." I think we call that a distinction without difference.
Yes.
Velma was now truly out of options. Her last meal was cheese doodles and a Coke. Decent choice. She had said her goodbyes to her family. There were protesters outside, some in support of Velma specifically, some just against the death penalty in the first place. At her request, her pastor performed communion. She put on new pink pajamas with flowers embroidered around the collar and above the pocket, a special request that she had made and been granted, a solemn tribute to her favorite pink dress and the happiest time of her childhood.
Oh, okay. That's really, that getcha.
I told you, it's, you don't feel bad for her in that she for sure killed people, but it's very, it's tragic, I guess, is maybe the way to think of it. Is like, could she have turned around, like you said, before she killed people?
I also have very torn feelings on the death penalty.
I know.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you which side I'm on. I think it depends.
Yeah,
on
which
any
is
given day.
Not how the law works.
No, it's definitely not.
No. At 1 o'clock, an hour left to go, she left her cell for the last time and was escorted to the preparation room and placed on a gurney. Her wrists and ankles were secured with straps. A cardiac monitor and a stethoscope were attached to her chest, and IV lines were inserted in each arm. A saline solution dripped from bags mounted on the gurney to keep the veins open. I almost said, like, trigger warning, this is, like, kind of gruesome. Then I realized what podcast we're on. But, you know, I'll just say trigger warning, I
Don't
guess.
talk about IVs.
Yeah, I know. That's what Marina's upset about.
Samara from The Ring and IVs are like, they take me down.
Did I mention there's a well? Just kidding. She was permitted one last visit with her pastor. The witnesses began entering the chamber at 1:40, 20 minutes left to go. After the prayer, Velma recorded her final statement. She said, "I want to say I'm sorry for all the hurt that I've caused. I know that everybody has gone through a lot of pain, all the families connected, and I'm sorry. And I want to thank everybody who has been supporting me these 6 years. I want to thank my family for standing with me through all of this, and my attorneys and all the support to me, everybody. The people with the prison department, I appreciate everything, their kindness and everything they've shown me during these 6 years." That was her final statement.
Okay.
At 1:50, 10 minutes to go, Velma was brought from the preparation area to the chamber, and witnesses could now see her. As the clock struck 2, the technicians disconnected the lines from the saline bags and attached them to the mixtures that would end her life. There were 3 lines, one for each of the technicians, which were obscured so they would not know whose line was responsible for her death. Upon the warden's signal, sodium pentothal was injected into the IV lines. Velma fell asleep almost instantly, and then a total muscle relaxant called Pavluvan began to flow into her veins. Within minutes, Velma's breath and heartbeat gradually came to a stop. At 2:10, her heart monitor went flat. Velma was gone and, as she told people, might have been waking up in heaven. Once she was pronounced dead, her body was turned over to a team of doctors. She had elected to donate her organs and was actually the first condemned prisoner to do so.
That was thoughtful of her.
I'm shocked she was the first person to do that.
Maybe it wasn't allowed previously.
I don't know.
That's very nice, though.
Yeah. Her family held a funeral for her while victims' families breathed a sigh of relief that closure had finally come. And Marina can breathe a sigh of relief because the pages are finally done.
Anyway.
Wow. So that's the story of, and tragic in all regards. Anytime that I think that someone possibly could have reformed prior to killing someone, I'm very upset.
I have a lot of feelings.
Yeah? You want to talk about them?
I'm verklempt. Didn't I? When did I say that the last time?
I don't remember.
I don't know. I always have a lot of feelings.
You're always verklempt.
I'm always verklempt. I always have a lot of feelings.
Yeah.
I think I have the most feelings about the death penalty.
I know.
When you lay out the process, all those appeals and all of the back and forth, I don't know. I'm very torn on it. So that's where most of it's coming from. Yeah. But again, it's she reformed, but she had the opportunity to reform because nobody killed her. And also, did she only reform because she was in prison? If you left her out in society, she would have just kept doing drugs and kept murdering people.
And if even after reforming, if you put her back out, what would have happened? And she had so much time in between. Again, but then we talked, we heard her tragedy and I'm not excusing what she did, but you listen to all of the tragedy all of her time in between each of the people she met, and had she been able to get her life together, maybe she would have not killed the next person. But
I think that the hardest part for me is that she didn't even have a good reason.
Right. It was literally so that every single time it was because she thought that she might get caught for forging checks or opening a loan. It was literally she might get caught for something. She's like, well, I guess it's time to kill you.
The one with the life insurance was made more sense to me because she got the life insurance, right?
But I don't even think that was her original. I really don't think that was her original reason. I honestly think that was a bonus to her.
It's extra senseless.
It seems like she didn't. They clearly couldn't argue this well or sufficiently, but it was almost like she didn't even realize what she was doing. She didn't take it seriously.
Right.
Even after she, while she was in court.
Right.
I don't know. Yeah.
Senseless.
Well, hey, if you're enjoying listening to Grim, make sure you're getting the most in between episodes. You can find us on Instagram at Grim Crime Podcast, and on Facebook, just search Grim, a true crime podcast. Or even better, you can subscribe to our Patreon by searching Grim, a true crime podcast on the Patreon app or website. Depending on the tier you choose, you'll get a shout out. You can even make those special requests, and Marina will attempt to do it.
And we'll attempt to read the messages too.
Yeah, now we
so
can.
Sorry.
Hey, to be fair, we never said you can get requests through Patreon. No, you should be able to. We'll read the messages. You can get bonus episodes and even access to our supremely awesome Discord server. You can send us an email. We definitely read the email at grimcrimepodcast@gmail.com. And that's also where you can send us case suggestions. Wherever you do listen, please rate us, or even better, leave us a written review. We just read one today. We super appreciate it. Thanks for being here. And remember, listen, learn, and stay alive until next time, because the future is grim.